questions. The Ikigai Adventure, a journey through the stations of happiness. A little over 2 years ago, the authors of this book completed a project that ended up going much further than we could ever have imagined. It all started in a Tokyo park where we discussed our shared wish to visit the village of the centenarians, a rural enclave in the north of Okinawa with the world's longest life expectancy. We decided to journey to that extraordinary place, and there we interviewed the eldest of its residents, who told us their secrets for living such a long, motivated, and energetic life. The outcome of that study was the book Ikigai, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life. Hick focuses on one of the keys to eternal youth, having a raison d'être that can provide us with the happiness that comes from always being busy. To everybody's surprise, it was the bestseller on Spain's most important online bookstore on the very day it was published. 2 months later, it had been sold to 30 countries, including the US, Russia, China, and even Japan itself. We got hundreds of messages and letters from readers enthusing about how Ikigai had inspired them, but they also asked us, "How do I find my Ikigai? I know what my life's passion is, but I am always so busy with my responsibilities I hardly have time for my Ikigai. How can I realize my dream?" We authors have asked ourselves the same questions. For that reason, we resolved that our next project would be entirely practical and would help both ourselves and our readers to find and empower all aspects of our Ikigai. That was the aim. 2 years on, the book you are holding is the fruit of that challenge. We are pleased to present you with a tool that can revolutionize your future by helping you understand your past so that you can live your present the way you want to. In order to whittle the tool into shape, we set off on a new journey across Japan, the country that inspired our first collaboration. In search of essential lessons to make your Ikigai the center of your universe and a driving force for change that will enable you to achieve your life mission. Written, Ikigai is a Japanese word that has no exact translation. Ikigai is the meaning of life, the thing that makes you get out of bed each day in eager anticipation. The word is made by joining iki, meaning life or being alive, and gai, meaning what is worthwhile and has value. So the literal translation would be that which makes life worth living. The Japanese believe we all have an Ikigai, or even several, inside us, even if we don't yet know it. The Shinkansen effect. We came across the Shinkansen effect while researching the Japanese miracle, which took place between 1960s and 1980s, when Japan left its post-war devastation behind to become the second largest economy in the world. Up until now, this groundbreaking concept has been used only in engineering and in Japanese companies, but we are convinced we can take advantage of the same principles to accelerate our personal achievements. Our mission in the first part of this book is to bring the Japanese miracle to the personal life of each of our readers and achieve an exponential leap, taking us from the impossible to the possible in each and every realm of our life. Yet, although the Shinkansen effect concept is a fascinating one, not everything in life is about doing things better and faster. In the journey we are about to undertake, we have developed techniques to make our past fuel our present, and in turn, for our present to light the way to a future in which we accomplish what we set out to do. In the East, they call it accepting the passage of time, because the only thing that does not change is change itself. And this point is worth delving into and understanding so that we may take control of where our life is headed and know how past changes have affected us. In this way, we will be ready in the future when our tracks fork and we have to make crucial decisions. It is essential to accept the passage of time as an opportunity if we want to be happy and pursue our goals. Our Ikigai is very similar to change. It is a constant that is always with us and mutates depending on which life phase we are in. Our reason for being is not the same at the age of 15 as it is at 70. It is essential to be in harmony with our Ikigai at every stage. Otherwise, we will feel as though we have strayed from our own path and outside forces have taken control of our everyday life. Our Ikigai is like a radio frequency. The better we tune into it, the more we will feel that our life has meaning. This is a route map that will help us to stay tuned throughout the inevitable ups and downs of our ever-changing existence, bringing together the past, present, and future to achieve personal fulfillment by accomplishing our calling. The Ikigai Path. With the Ikigai Path, we seek a balance between our past, present, and future in order to achieve complete personal fulfillment, developing our whole talent in order to accomplish our goals. On our journey through Japan, we chose 3 locations, which helped us to divide this book into 3 main sections. 1. Journey through the future, Tokyo and the Japanese capital. We will take the bullet train, aiming for the stars while we design our ideal future. What we can achieve in life is limited only by the reach of our imagination. You will find exercises for planning the future to your full potential and will activate your inner Shinkansen. 2. Journey through the past. Kyoto. We will visit this province with a slow train, which will give us time to savor the landscape of tradition and the past. The nostalgia of this train will help us to reflect upon what we have already lived through and to get to know ourselves better. The answer to the Greek maxim, know yourself, largely comes down to how we reacted to the challenges we were faced with in our past. Interpreting experiences in a positive way is both emotionally and mentally healthy. Being aware of our past gives meaning to our life story. Rediscovering the passions we had as children and teenagers gives us clues that are fundamental to identifying our true Ikigai. 3. Journey through the present. Eyes the eyes. Grand Shrine is over 2,000 years old. Should it belong to the past? The Japanese destroy this historic building every 20 years and then rebuild it. Thus, the Ai Shrine lives in an everlasting present. This tradition will help us to see how unwise it is to allow ourselves to be dragged down by the weight of the past, since we are free to decide what we want to be and do at any time. While strolling through the ISE shrine, we will also visit temples where we will learn to draw Enso circles and understand the power that Eastern disciplines like archery have to draw our spirit into the present. We shall also see how any kind of art is a marvelous tool for anchoring us in the present and helping us reach a state of flow. This is not just a book. If you read it carefully and apply the suggestions you will find in it to your everyday life, it will take you to a place that, perhaps up until now, has only existed in your imagination. Prepare to experience great changes and surprises as you enjoy a new landscape. Breathe and open your mind. The journey is about to begin. Thank you for coming with us. Hector Garcia Amp, Francesc Miralles, Part 1, A Journey Through Our Future, Tokyo. The Shinkansen Effect and Other Techniques for Creating Great Personal Projects and Developing the Inner Discipline. To see them through, our starting point is Shinjuku Station, which is traversed by between 3 and 4 million passengers a day and is registered in the Guinness Book of World Records as the busiest transport hub in the world. Shinjuku is the epitome of what Japan is capable of achieving. The first challenge here is managing to meet someone, since this station has over 200 exits. And getting it wrong can be disastrous. To make things easier for ourselves, we decided to meet in the New York bar on the end story of the Park Hyatt Hotel, the very place where several scenes from the movie Lost in Translation were filmed. Our table is candlelit and encircled by a large window offering views of Tokyo's never-ending sea of buildings. The cityscape shines and twinkles, as though it would like to transform into a starry sky. A live jazz band is playing Miles Davis. Here in Tokyo, don't you get the feeling you're in the future? Asks Francesc as he sips on his Yamazaki whiskey. That's one of the reasons why I live here, replies Hector. Science fiction and futuristic stuff has always appealed to me. But doesn't it get to you? Doesn't this obsession with perfection seem a little inhuman to you? Sometimes, yes. I could spend hours telling you about how smothering it is to work in such a perfectionist business environment, but I like to look on the bright side of things. Tell me something positive, Hector. If you had to choose one lesson you've learned from Japan after living here for 12 years, what would it be? Ganbarimasu. Tiramisu? Francesc laughs. Not tiramisu. It's pronounced ganbarimasu, and it means trying your hardest to achieve an objective. It's a word the Japanese use when they're facing a challenge, whether it's personal, or sports, or work-related. Ganbarimasu means never giving up. And that is what I admire the most about the Japanese. They don't give up even if it's a seemingly impossible objective. That Shinkansen effect, adds Francesc. For sure, having objectives that seem impossible, or setting ourselves lofty ambitions, is what activates the Shinkansen effect in us. But if we don't combine it with the power of Ganbarimasu, the continuous effort, our dreams for the future will fade away and never become reality. Get ready to activate your Shinkansen effect, Hector. On this journey, we're going to finish this book. Ganbarimasu. On leaving the Park Hyatt, we moved on to one of the tiny bars hidden away in the back streets next to Shinjuku Station. The neon lights and the constant hustle and bustle here makes it seem as though it is never nighttime. Along with Shibuya, this is one of the Tokyo neighborhoods that never sleeps. A frenzied rhythm with no allowance made for rest, with people forever rushing around trying to get the most out of everything and enjoying themselves as much as possible after work. In a bar that has room for just 3 customers, we meet a man who has worked for over 40 years for the Tokyo City Council. We chat briefly, while a strange young man with 2 cats and a basket watches us. Then he comes with us to another back street. After climbing several stories of a filthy building, we end up in an Okinawan restaurant, where a man is playing traditional music on a sanshin, a string instrument from the southern islands. This ambiance makes us feel nostalgic about the journey we made to Ogimi to write our previous book, Ikigai. This is where our first night in Tokyo ends. The following day we climb aboard the legendary bullet train, the village of centenarians. In our previous book, Ikigai, The Secrets of Japan for a Long and Happy Life, we told of our adventures in Ogimi, a village with little more than 3,000 inhabitants in the north of Okinawa, which is considered the place with the highest life expectancy in the world. Not only do they live a long time, but they also have one of the lowest rates of cancer in Japan, and the same is true of other diseases such as diabetes. Many scientists have gone to Ogimi to study the locals. We went there with a camera on our shoulder and interviewed more than 100 old people over the course of a week. We asked them about their daily routines, their diet, their family and friends, and about their secret for a health, why long life. Of course, we also asked them what their Ikigai was. Living with them, we realized nobody was really retired. They were all busy and many of them were working several jobs. Ever since you stopped doing the accounting at the greengrocer's, you've started to lose your edge, says Akiko to a 96-year-old friend, scolding him for having relaxed after leaving his job. At the age of 92, Akiko combines her role as head of the neighborhood association with the sale of handmade bags in a village shop. She is still fully active and told us, "If you don't do anything, death comes for you." One of the conclusions we reached in our investigation was that the village of the centenarian's inhabitants have found their Ikigai while never ceasing to be active. Perhaps the greatest secret to longevity is to always keep busy, devoting our time to activities we love. First station, Shinkansen, bullet train. Thinking. Before the train sets a course towards new horizons, let us look at the origin of the concept around which this adventure revolves. To do so, we will go back in time a quarter of a century to look at a man named Jack Welch. Maybe you are not familiar with the name of General Electric's chairman from 1980. A man considered one of the best executives of the last century. Under his leadership, a system was introduced to review employees' objectives and tasks on a quarterly basis, which is still used to this day in most medium-sized and large companies. His system worked reasonably well until he realized certain departments were starting to become less efficient. What was going on? The path of least resistance. On closely observing the operating processes, he realized the employees in the various departments were filling in their quarterly objective sheet, proposing incremental improvements and even trivialities. In other words, they would write down easily achievable objectives, which they were sure of reaching by making as little effort as possible. What is popularly known as the path of least resistance. Radical change, incremental changes. Incremental versus radical omelet. An incremental change is one that adds a little improvement to something that already exists. For example, whenever it was that the first Spanish cook had the idea of adding sliced fried potatoes to the omelet, he managed to change it into a potato omelet. The omelet already existed, and the incremental improvement came from adding potatoes to it. The radical improvement took place much earlier, when the first individual decided to break an egg, beat it, and fry the result. Something that had not existed until then, the omelet, had been born. Unquestionably, this was a culinary revolution. We have all experienced it sometime. When a project's main objectives have already been achieved, we then relax and do just enough to keep everything working. Let's face it, we humans are lazy by nature, but if we want to better ourselves and reach new heights, we have to fight against complacency and lack of vision. This is not restricted just to business matters. The path of least resistance also thrives in a variety of areas, such as looking after our body and personal health, our relationship with our partner and/or children, managing friendships and free time, intellectual, artistic, and even spiritual goals. Whether out of laziness or because of the fast pace of our lives, we end up eating and sleeping in the same way until our body gives us a serious warning. Or we become stale with our partner until a crisis is provoked, and so on in all areas of our lives. From time to time, we make little adjustments and improvements, like the employees with their quarterly reviews, but they are just band-aids that fail to change the situation in any meaningful way. It is not always a matter of laziness. Sometimes we are simply busy maintaining what we have devoted so much time to building, and we have neither the time nor the energy to take it to the next level. Or perhaps true change scares us, so that they would take risks and keep on innovating? He would find the answer on a trip he made to Tokyo in 1993. On this trip, he met Eiji Mikawa, the chairman of General Electric's Japanese subsidiary and a specialist in medical technology. Welch was impressed by the speed at which they introduced changes, outperforming the rest of General Electric's divisions. The Japanese subsidiary had been launching the best and fastest TAC, computed tomography machines in the world onto the market for years. Mikawa explained to Welch the secret that inspired the book you are holding. If you want a train to go 10 kilometers/h faster, you just add more horsepower to the engine. But if you need to go from 150 kilometers h to 300 kilometers h, you have to think about many other things. Do we need to change all the tracks and make them wider? Do we have to change the suspension system? Do we need to make the passenger cars more aerodynamic? You have to think differently, outside the box. You won't get a new train with a few modifications. You need to start from scratch with a whole new way of thinking. A seemingly impossible assignment to find the origin of this eye-opening concept. We have to go back to the year 1958. In the midst of the post-war economic miracle, the Japanese government issued direct orders to Japan Railways, to find a quicker way to connect Tokyo with Osaka. A few months later, the JR engineers presented a proposal for a train that would travel at an average speed of 100 km/h. This was a breakneck speed for the time, and had this first project become a reality, it would have resulted in one of the fastest trains in the world. However, the JR executives' response to the engineers was utterly unexpected. "We need a train that goes twice as fast." The engineers were utterly astonished and said it was absolutely impossible to achieve that. A 200 km/h train belonged to the realm of science fiction movies. The executives replied that they could spend as much money as they wanted, since the government had given them carte blanche for that seemingly impossible project. The Shinkansen effect. The engineers came back a few months later with a new proposal that implied a comprehensive change in all aspects of the future train. To achieve such an outrageous speed, they would need to change the shape, height, and width of the railway tracks that had been used up until then in Japan. Spend a large part of the budget on making tunnels to cross the mountainous area around Mount Fuji. Completely redesign the concept of a train that people had at that time in order to come up with a lighter and more aerodynamic one, and thus overcome air resistance. Essentially, it would have been enough to carry out one or two improvements to gain 10 km/h. But to double the speed, you had to change everything and approach this mode of transport with an entirely new way of thinking. This radical change, this Shinkansen effect, is widely used in engineering and business, but we can also apply to all the divisions of our life. To come back to the engineers' almost impossible mission in 1964, just 6 years after the government had thrown down the challenge, the first bullet train in history was inaugurated for the Tokyo Olympics. Achieving a milestone that caused astonishment around the world, the Shinkansen connected Tokyo to Osaka at more than 200 km/h, cutting down the journey time between the two cities from 6 hours 40 minutes to 3 hours 10 minutes. The innovations that came about through the development of the first bullet train in history would revolutionize train transportation on the entire planet for decades. The first step towards that great breakthrough, the benefits of which are still visible today, came about when an entirely new way of thinking was adopted. Shinkansen, the bullet train. The term Shinkansen literally means new trunk line. The Japanese word is made up of the characters new, trunk, and line. At the time of its inauguration, in 1964, the train called Hikari, the light, covered the new trunk line route between Tokyo and Osaka, becoming the first high-speed train in history. Reaching a speed in excess of 200 km/h, both the Hikari train and the Shinkansen line came to be widely known abroad as the Japanese bullet train. Shinkansen thinking Eiji Mikawa was fond of talking about how bullet train thinking was applied to everything in his company. For example, if the directors in one of his divisions told him they were planning to reduce costs by 5%, he would ask them to think of ways to reduce them by 50%. Jack Welch was so impressed by Eiji Mikawa's approach that he imported the philosophy and applied it to General Electric, where he asked all his employees and divisions to add bullet train objectives to their quarterly reviews. This is one of the main reasons why General Electric has remained competitive and continues to innovate, even though the company was founded more than 100 years ago and has hundreds of thousands of employees. If you have an objective you think you're going to reach in 10 years, the best strategy to make it happen is to think about how you can manage to reach the same objective in 1 year. Peter Thiel, Silicon Valley investor, the companies or people that set bullet train objectives tend to end up standing out in our society. For example, Elon Musk resolved to undertake what was in many people's view the crazy idea of building rockets capable of taking off and landing. With his private company SpaceX, he duly accomplished in less than 10 years something that NASA had not managed to do in over 50 years of research and development. Elon Musk has also designed the Hyperloop, a land transport system that could reach speeds of 1,200 kilometers/h, and as a personal bullet train objective, he aims to send the first human to Mars. Will he accomplish it? And what about you? In which area of your life do you want to apply the Shinkansen effect? Set your first Shinkansen objective for a dream or aspiration to deserve this label. It has to be seemingly impossible to achieve. If you feel you can achieve it relatively easily, it cannot be classed as a bullet train objective. Visualizing seemingly impossible goals helps you to think laterally and to get rid of old ideas or processes. Don't be scared to write down your Shinkansen objectives. Do you want to fly your own helicopter? Write it down. Do you want to travel to Alaska and see the aurora borealis? Write it down. Do you want your family business sales to triple? Write it down. Do you want to direct a film? Write it down. We insist on the writing it down part because the first step to achieving a personal milestone is as simple as writing it down. Get started now. My number one Shinkansen objective is, of course, just writing something down is not going to make it happen. Next, write down 10 initiatives you will undertake to make it easier for you to accomplish your first bullet train objective. State the action, how you will do it, and when you will start. What you will do, how you will do it, when you will do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For example, if my number one Shinkansen objective is to give a speech in front of 1,000 people, my action list could be as follows. Buy books on how to speak in public. Meet speakers who can give me advice. Watch YouTube videos of speakers I admire. Record myself practicing on camera and watch myself on the computer screen. Prepare a simple talk for some local event with a small audience as practice. Join a public speaking course. Enroll in theater classes to overcome stage fright. The Uruguayan coach Miralles recommends specifying what we will do in each one of these actions, how we will do it, and when we will start. For example, what you will do, read books about public speaking. How you will do it, ask for guidance in a specialized bookshop. When you will do it, tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. on my work break. Once you have specified the 10 actions, each one of them with its what, how, and when, sign below this sheet, making a binding commitment to yourself, and put it someplace you can see it during your daily routine. Once signed, there is no turning back. The bullet train will have started rolling. Notes. From the book Jack Welch Speaks, Wit and Wisdom from the World's Greatest Business Leader. Second station. Mount Fuji first stretching the boundaries. Our train stops at the peaceful town of Mishima, which announces the upcoming view of Mount Fuji. Will the mountain most revered by the Japanese be visible today, or will it be hidden behind a curtain of mist? Expert travelers ask for a seat on the Mount Fuji side when they book a Shinkansen ticket from Tokyo to Kyoto, or vice versa. From these seats they wait impatiently for the imposing spirit mountain to reveal itself in all its splendor. However, if the day is not entirely clear, the bullet train will pass within. touching distance of this dreamed-about place without our managing to see it. Mount Fuji is always there, as are all the great objectives in our life, but sometimes the worldly mists make them invisible to us. The mountain of immortality. The first written reference to Mount Fuji known to us appears in a 10th century tale. The central character is a young girl named Kaguya, who came from the moon and had rejected the emperor's marriage proposal. One August night, under a full moon, a great light absorbed Kaguya and the moon people took her back home. The emperor, who was still in love, wrote a letter to the girl and ordered an army of men to take his words to the summit of Mount Fuji, without death, the closest place to the moon known to the ancient Japanese. When the soldiers reached the summit, they burned the letter in the hope that the smoke would reach the moon, and the emperor's words could be read by Kaguya. Along with the letter, they also burned the elixir of immortality, since the emperor did not wish to live forever. The word Fushi means without death or immortal. With the passing of time, the pronunciation evolved into Fuji, full of wealth, soldier, in reference to the heroic soldiers who climbed up to the summit to take the message to the moon. Ever since then, it has been said that when Mount Fuji erupts, the smoke transports the might emperor's words to our moon to converse with Kaguya, thus representing love and the eternal hope of making the impossible possible. Sir Rutherford Alcock's adventure, however, the first person known to have climbed to the volcano's snowbound summit, was not one of the emperor's soldiers, but a Buddhist monk in the year 663. Until that point, reaching the summit had been considered impossible, although with time that impossibility was overcome by more and more people. Still, until the start of the Meiji era, in the 19th century, no woman or foreigner had been allowed to climb Fuji, as it was considered a sacred mountain. The first non-Japanese to reach the White Summit was the British diplomat Sir Rutherford Alcock, who, accompanied by a group of Japanese guards, led 9 British climbers to the peak in 1860s. The Japanese officials told him that it was reckless to go up at the end of November, and that he would not make it because the weather conditions made it impossible. What's more, a typhoon was approaching Japan. When Alcock's group began the ascent, the typhoon was indeed approaching. Some government officials said it was a message from the gods warning foreigners that it was a forbidden place for them. But the diplomat ignored everyone who told him it was impossible, and one step at a time, reached the summit, becoming, along with his group, the first foreigner to do so. At that time, it was not an easy challenge, and many mountaineers had died in the attempt, but the athletic Alcock climbed from sea level up to the summit, at an altitude of 3,776 meters. Taking 8 hours to get there and another 3 hours to go back down. Sir Rutherford Alcock's hand-drawn illustration of Mount Fuji from his personal diary. Luck was with him, and the typhoon struck the coast of Shizuoka just as he completed his descent. Alcock described Mount Fuji as an inhospitable, rocky place that looked as though it did not belong to this planet. As he was a very good artist, he produced the first depiction seen in the West of this sacred place's characteristic silhouette. He narrated his ascent in letters he sent to the British government over the 3 years he spent in Japan as not only the first British diplomat, but also the first Briton to live in Japanese territory. The last stretch was the hardest. The ever-increasing fatigue worked against us. We frequently stopped to fight against the pain in our legs and to get our breath back. Some of us thought about going back, but we carried on until the final step up to the mountaintop, which revealed to us the summit crater and the views. Sir Rutherford Alcock. Mission: possible. Our life is full of mountains we believe to be forbidden, or that we feel incapable of climbing. But the fog that prevents us from seeing the path ahead is usually on the lens through which we are viewing it. We have to wipe our gaze clean of impossibilities, as we would a steamed-up window, before setting off on our way to the summit. Because the impossible is, in reality, a mental label, a deceptive filter before our eyes. Over the course of a lifetime, there are many things we irrationally feel unable to carry out, since just thinking about them makes us feel terrifyingly dizzy. We go along mentally building many of these walls, and when they finally tumble, we cannot believe they ever caused us so much fear, paralysis, and frustration in our life. There is a very thin mental line dividing the possible from the impossible, and the job of the engineer or literary Sherpa, just to give you two examples, is to help us to cross it. Walt Disney used to say, "There is nothing more enjoyable than doing the impossible." With that in mind, just for the fun of it, it could be a good weekly objective to do at least one thing we feel ourselves utterly incapable of doing. Learning Japanese or Hungarian, taking up a sport that seems very difficult, playing the piano without sheet music, exploring an untamed country, or climbing the equivalent of Mount Fuji where we live. As a good friend's WhatsApp motto has it, everything starts with the relabeling. Mission possible. Make a list of impossible ventures that weren't a very powerful exercise for sweeping our horizon clean of obstacles, prejudices, and things we believe we cannot do, is to remember those impossible ventures that turned out not to be so. We tried this out with the following results. Francesc's 3 false impossible ventures. 1. Learning to swim. Until the age of 14, I was terrified of water and was convinced I would never manage to cross a swimming pool where I couldn't touch the bottom. It took some time, but I ended up discovering I floated. 2. Finishing a college degree. Considering I failed 4 or 5 school subjects every year, neither I nor my teachers nor anyone else thought I was capable of getting my high school diploma, far less any kind of degree. When I shook off that prejudice, I managed to do a whole degree course in German. 3. Having a girlfriend. I also saw that as something impossible until I was 23 or 24, since the girls I liked seemed like goddesses or extraterrestrials to me and out of my reach. The moment I realized they were like me, with fears, doubts, and desires of their own, that aura of impossibility disappeared. Hector's 3 false impossible ventures. 1. Working at CERN. When reading books on popular science, I always imagined NASA and CERN as places where only the chosen few could work. It seemed like an impossible dream that would forever live in the realm of my imagination. But in 2004, I was accepted at CERN, where what I had imagined turned into reality. 2. Traveling to Japan. As a child, I would open an atlas, and Japan seemed one of the most remote places on the planet to me, a faraway exotic country that I would most likely never visit. I have now been living in the land of the rising sun for over 12 years. 3. Publishing a book. Isaac Asimov was one of the authors I was crazy about as a teenager. I read his biography, and I was fascinated to find he had published over 400 books. At that time, the publishing industry Asimov described seemed like something from another world. Now, our book Ikigai has an international audience, and the US edition was published by Penguin, one of the publishing houses that published Asimov. Whenever you feel incapable of doing something, a very effective practice is to write down your own list of all the things that you had at one time you believed you would never achieve, but ended up managing to do. Sometimes they can be silly inventories, as we have shown, but they help to knock down the walls between you and your confidence. 3rd station. Genba.